Hey Paul, how are you doing? Good to meet
Doing
you,
well. Hello, Steve. Good to see you.
and welcome to episode two, retail media technology. Paul, you're VP, I think, of strategy and partnerships at ISM. Tell us a bit about ISM. Who are they, and what do they do?
Yeah, thanks for doing this together, Steve. I always enjoy talking to you. Um, ISM, in-store marketplace, I think is something maybe people are just hearing. The word Vibenomics might be a little bit more familiar to folks that are listening. We started building this platform back in 2017, 2016. And we set out in the very beginning to build an advanced way for retail media networks to digitize their in-store environment. You know all too well from being in the business that in-store has been around a long time, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the legacy, paper and signage, right? Um, and we anticipated back in 2017 that as retail media started to digitize in store, they would need a platform that could help them manage that inventory in a way that's really unique for in store, which is how do the merchant or the comms team or the people that operate the stores and the retail media teams work together, right, to control that experience, and to ultimately sell that experience in a way that's brand safe and more automated. So in the day when that has come now, when things are programmatic, that the retail media team can use that inventory in a programmatic way. So our technology is it's impression based. It's a SaaS solution that connects to hardware that we provide in the store, or that maybe it's a technology they already have in their store, an existing digital provider that we connect to. It's really a SaaS platform that's used as a tool, but kind of comes to life in the physical store, right? So I would say we took a bet back in 2017 that this would be necessary, and today bringing audio and visuals into one tool has been very, very well received in the market in the United States. And now, more recently, in the last 8 months, 9 months, we've been really pressing on UK um, and Europe to try and bring this technology to that side of the pond.
That's very good. I guess when we think about in-store retail media, of course, that is where it began. And
Hmm.
as you say, and especially in Europe, it's um, far and away the biggest channel still, despite all of the growth
Hmm.
on-site and off-site digital. But when you talk about in-store digital, we're talking presumably about in-store radio, which I know has been around for a long time,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
the advent of screens. Is
Hmm.
that's the area that you're helping retailers um, to win within?
Yeah, yeah. You have a great background in in-store radio, right? With your time at various retail media networks
Like
across
I'm
the
old enough
U.S.
to remember the launch of Asda FM, which was probably before you were born, Paul. But
Oh
I
well,
think
now.
that was definitely the late, 1990 at the latest, perhaps late 80s.
Yeah,
So yeah, in-store radio's
yeah.
been around for a long, long time.
Our hair matches, so I don't know that it was before I was born. That's true, but yeah, I mean, I came from 30 years in traditional radio, television, mobile apps, in-car dash entertainment. I've always been in the business of creating an audience across the media type that may have traditionally been a broadcast media. And where in-store radio back when you were there and when you launched it was very much you give me a budget and I will play 2 spots an hour in every store across the entire chain, right? And what we developed was an ability for you to take that same budget and allocate impressions so that it could be maybe just certain hours of a day, certain stores, based on distribution of product, based on a promotional campaign, right? Let's run it only on Friday and Saturday because that's when my target audience is most likely to be buying my product, right? And so we created that world in the early days. We started with someone you're very familiar with, a Dunhunby uh, product, right, out of 8451. And we started that kind of targeting discussion back in 2018, 2019 with them, right, and launched in 2020. And so that's really where we establish all this capability for a retail media team or a buyer to say, this is where I want my budget to most be applied in a way that works for me. And now we're applying that to visuals, right? And so we're following the IAB zones. I was a big part of that standard writing that started in the US and now has been adopted in Europe. And really zone specific, all of store. How do I, as a retail media, offer the advertiser the most media plan aligned way of thinking about in-store digital, right? Without the 6 weeks to produce a paper sign and have someone visit the store and stand it up in the corner and then have to come back and take it down, right? All of those inefficiencies. How do we make that better and faster? And obviously the screens explosion, right? And surprisingly, UK just at the forefront of digital screen deployment, right? Because of the capital or just timing. How do we make that so efficient and so easy to execute that it creates net new money, right? That's the goal, right? Net new revenue.
I mean, that's really interesting, Paul, and completely spot on. I mean, talking to retail media network owners, one of the things that they're under pressure to achieve, and they obviously want to achieve, is to be able to show to the business that they are bringing in money that is over and above what would have come in either anyway, or that comes in through the commercial income streams, which is still today far and away the biggest input. And of course, a great way to show that is to bring in money from media agencies, because clearly that would have not happened anyway. And of course, then the problem has always been that the way that media agencies buy media is entirely different to the way that retail media has traditionally been bought and sold in a quite labor-intensive way between commercial teams on the supplier side and retail media selling teams on the other. And so I think what you've done is you've said, look, we understand how media agencies buy radio and or buy digital, and it is impression based, and it's very automated and using modern new buying tools.
Right.
And so what you've done is you've built an interface, I think, that allows retailers to plug into that world, and then makes it much easier and makes it easy for the agencies to buy that audience. Is that a fair summation of what you have?
Yeah, the analogy that I often talk through is if you have a group of advertisers, some portion of them is always going to buy one way and another portion is going to buy only another way. And so if I have 5,000 advertisers, if I'm a retail media network and I work with, say, 5,000 different CPGs, right? Maybe 4,000 of those are perfectly fine going through your managed service, and they'll come to your team and they'll include it in that media plan with your team. So they could use our tool or maybe their retail media platform to execute against that, buy impressions, spend a budget. 1,000 of those CPGs may only want to transact through a DSP with handheld keyboards, right? A Trade Desk, Yahoo, DB360, StackAdapt. That may be the only way they want that budget to be spent, right? So you really have to address both of those so that the funnel of those different buying behaviors comes down into one place where the retail media team feels like they are in control of that pricing, right? Of that inventory allocation, a creative approval between themselves and the merchant or the comms team. That's what we've really tried to address is in order to open up that incremental budget, right? Or that net new through possibly a new buying channel like programmatic. The tool itself has to keep in mind all of the ways, all of the I'd say requirements, maybe limitations, maybe construct, right, of the way they have to operate, which is different than e-com, right, Steve? Right? You think about e-com, what does a retail media network do? They stand up a website, they're in control of the inventory, right? They're in control of the approval for the most part. But now in in-store, they have to consider other people's input. So that's really what we set out to address. I mean, the folks that on my team that developed the software, um, your listeners may be aware of a little company called Salesforce. Um, the guys that built our software developed Salesforce Marketing Cloud. I mean, this is built as an enterprise platform from day one, to be thoughtful of the way that should be executed. And then, I'd push the question back to you, which is, you remember those days where you had to deal with shopper versus trade versus, where's the money coming from? That conversation, oddly enough, is still happening, right? You know that world better than I do, right? And so you have to address kind of like the transition from legacy, who controls the budget, right? Where's the money being spent, while trying to open up new channels and new avenues for people to plan their buys.
Yeah, no, I think that's why anything that makes it easy for media agencies to buy retail media, that's going to be very well received by retail media network operators, simply because they can be certain that that is incremental spend. Now, you said that you're just really getting started in Europe, or at that very kind of early stages, and the company itself is fairly new. You saw this opportunity, and you've had to build this kind of enterprise software. But one of the companies that you said have been an early adopter, Kroger, if I understood that correctly, they have a very high following in the UK, not least because of, as you said, its origins as dunnhumby USA, and dunnhumby, of course, one of the leaders in retail media in its entirety, part of Tesco, but also has given birth to, or the alumni of dunnhumby are now, many of them running, certainly in the UK, I can think of 3, 4, or 5 retail media networks that are run by dunnhumby alumni. So there's a lot of interest in Kroger. Very, very well respected retailer, and one of the leaders in retail media networks globally. So what was it about ISM? What did Kroger see in this platform, and how are they using it, if you're able to share that with us?
Yeah. Respectfully, there's not a lot I can share about the way that they use it. I mean, their success is far and above most, I would say, global retail media networks, right? They're top 3 or 5 globally, in the way they've executed their business. We started with them as Vibenomics. That was our brand at the time. And so, our relationship with them was launching with audio, and um, really, I think if you look through 2020, I mean, the digitization of in-store was still a fight, if that's the right word, right? And so I think we used Vibenomics as a way to build the brand of in-store. We participated in the IB standards through that time, and so I think my experience with someone of that scale, with that awareness, has really driven us to do better, right? I mean, I think that's really the best learning that we took out of that was, we had a concept in the beginning with Vibenomics. We got better through that conversation with targeting, with how to more accurately represent what the inventory is that's available, the best way to price it, right? How to find advertisers that want to use this media in a creative way, right? Because it's not just a radio ad, it's not just a TV ad, it's very contextual, right? How do you drive that? So we learned a lot through case studies. We learned a lot through how to complement a media plan, so that the advertiser sees results. If they're not moving product off the shelf, or they're growing their own revenue, it doesn't matter what media is, they're not going to stay with it, right? So we've learned how to do that better. And that's what we've really brought to the UK is, I think, you look at audio and visual companies, tech companies that are in the market in the UK and in Europe at large, they're still selling it the old way, right? They're still selling it as like a basic spots per hour or a loop. They're probably, funding all of the hardware to take the majority of the revenue. They're not empowering the retail media networks, right? To learn how to use a tool that gives them more control and a greater share. I mean, it's a margin play, right? So how do you help the retail media adopt a technology that gives them the most margin? All those things we learned through working with them. It's not one thing. It's kind of this breadth of what are all the ways that you can make the retail media network the most successful through digitizing audio and screens. And that's something I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of the fact that my team has done that. And we're coming into the UK as a mature business. I feel like we are. And I've done, and I've met with other UK retail media networks that make comments like, this isn't half baked. This is fully baked. This is, wow, this is amazing that I can have this level of control. But it's also a journey, right, in the UK, because we're a new brand, we're a new voice. We're asking people to think differently. So that takes time, right? To be that kind
Well,
of a change
interesting.
driver.
Speaking to I'm hearing it multiple times now from retail media networks. There's such innovation, not just in store but on site, on audiences, on data. I think one of the real challenges that they're facing now is how do they execute quickly in order to take advantage of what's new. But of course, they've got to prioritize that, and in many cases, they're a little bit stuck, or they're reliant on the IT departments of the big retailers that they work for. So it's not always within their control. So, so I would imagine here that this must be quite light touch on the retailers' IT systems, because presumably you're interfacing with the screens and or the radio operators. If I understood that correctly, is that right?
Yeah, you've hit something very important there. I mean, I think, the fact that it's a physical world, connectivity, right? And so we have a need to get something from their IT department. And in most cases, that is some form of device certification. And, a cloud service that the IT department passes some kind of security compliance test or privacy compliance test, right? And those kind of things. And so I would say if we're coming in fresh and it's a new thing, completely new, then we have to rely on the IT people to certify a device that's going to be plugged into their network. But we do have, to your point, been successful with connecting to incumbents as well. I have a large discount chain here in the U.S. that has thousands and thousands of locations, and they have an incumbent radio media player company, and we just connect an API to their existing provider, right, and turn that inventory into programmatic capable inventory. So in that regard, the only thing we really need from an IT person is just, hey, here's what we're doing. Do you approve of it? It's a pretty quick process. So that's one of the things that I'm really excited about is what we did learn through our experience, not just with the grocery vertical, but also we're now in the sporting goods, apparel, discount, drugstore. We're in a lot of different verticals, and walking in the door and saying you have options, right? Then that really helps the conversation. We were acquired by Mood Media back in 2023. Our software solution was. Mood Media is global, right? They have 1 million screens. They're in 161 countries. They know the customer experience space. So they have the trucks and ladders to install things. They have the capability, right? And we do find that if you want the most efficient way to operate, making sure the uptime is good and impressions are delivered, I walk in the door with Mood Media and we can get through those things. But I'll offer the flexibility. If you have another screen provider, right, and they have any sense of API development, we can connect to them in a matter of weeks and make sure that we can get off and running. So I think that's a big change for this our marketplace. When Vibenomics, it still exists, it's a direct sales ad company now. With ISM, I'm able to say I'm agnostic. I mean, I really want to make sure that the ideal situation is delivered. Mood Media, and their hardware and their management maintenance, that's top notch. Like nobody's going to get better than that. But I do realize that there has been maybe a capital investment made. They may be in a contract that can't be changed for a while, but I can connect to that technology through an API and say, okay, now you can access the tool and use it effectively. So that's a big difference, Steve. I'm glad you raised it, because I think if you come in there with a hard and fast, your IT needs to do this right now, here's new equipment, you're gonna have to buy all new things, it makes those retail media networks go, wait a minute, wait. There's a lot out of my control that you're asking me for here, right? Give me some flexibility and maybe we can get this done better.
And this feels like it's very much in their control, because, as you say, you might have to upgrade the media players on the screens, but if you're working with a retailer's media partner who has a very modern screen infrastructure, then as you say, you sort of plug right in. You also made another comment earlier, which is I want to sort of circle back on, because I suppose if you think of how outdoor advertising has evolved. In the old days, you kind of bought nationally, and you kind of got the sites, the poster boards, and the D6s and so on that the operator was making available. But of course, over the years, what's happened is that the targeting of those has become much more precise, and in the retail space, people will be very familiar with the opportunity to buy poster sites that are sat in store car parks or around them, and you can buy other audiences more granularly. And as you said earlier, retail media has traditionally been look, I have these number of screens, or I've got these number of stores with playing radio. These are the available slots. Send me what you have, and we'll kind of plug them in. But I think what you're enabling is store-specific monetization, and even possibly store part. There's sort of different parts of the store, and to try and do that without some enabling software would just be a huge task. Is that right? That you're giving the retailers that flexibility, and then do you have any examples where retailers have taken advantage of that and are benefiting as a consequence?
Sure. There is quite a difference, I would say, between digital out of home and retail media, in the sense that digital out of home it's a very macro view of your audience, and I think that's fine. That's what its purpose is, right? Open space, opportunity to see, likely to see, right? Those are the kinds of metrics that are typically used. It's a larger format, perhaps. What we decided was, especially going back to, you look at our work with IAB and developing these zone standards, where there's a taxonomy for vestibule, front of store, entrance of store, and then as you move, center store, racetrack. Is racetrack a term you use?
Kind of. I mean, vestibules. It's not really well used, but I think you have the store entrance and
store entrance. Yep. Yeah. So I apologize for the poor translation. Chevron in the vial in a specific category, maybe snacks versus dairy versus deli. And when we build this infrastructure with the retail media network and the merchant, we define all of that up front, so that when it comes down to planning a media campaign, bespoke targeting is native. That's a really important part of when you look down the road of how an advertiser wants to visualize their own goals, their own share of category, spending per trip, spending per household. Right? Those are the kind of things they're thinking about. You have to establish this this bespoke mindset. So if we put this into practice, let's say I'm a brand name of, say, frozen chicken, right? I know that I want to be, perhaps I want some of my messaging to be in a deli section, right? As a complement to something else that's being sold in the deli. And I want to make sure that my signage is in the frozen aisle, because that's where that's closest to my product. And I want audio to be everywhere throughout the store so I can perform wayfinding. I can use a creative audible, a prompt, if you will, to get people to as they move through the store to think about their brand. That's really what we enable. It's not, hi, I send you a spreadsheet once a week of creative references and campaign names and a bunch of attached files, or maybe a shared folder, and then somebody goes in on the vendor side and says, okay, this goes everywhere in the store and it's going to run once a loop. That's just not good enough anymore. You want to establish this platform in a way that if I'm that chicken company, I want to be able to bring up my buy side tool, right? And I want to say, I want all deli sections and frozen sections in these 3 grocers, because that's where my promotion is running. And I want audio to be the same in all of them, so I have consistency across the messaging. And I want to do that for 500,000 pounds. Press the button, get some creative approval from the other side through ISM, and the campaign runs. That's the real world effect of having this kind of control over your environment. And I think that's, to your point, that you have to take it to that next level for it to really be what retail media wants it to be, what brands really want out of in store.
No, that's very good, Paul. I mean, I'm sure this is going to be well received in Europe as it is in the US. You're describing it as software. So, what's the business model? Are you taking a revenue share, or is it a software fee? What's the business model for retail media networks?
The ISM model is, let's go back to what we've learned with other folks here in the US and other retail media networks. We know that when e-com launched, it was the highest margin business, 80% plus. And then when that started to sell out and CPM started to max out, they added offsite. And then offsite became a 30 to 35% margin business. And it still is, because they have to buy the inventory that they sell. We really want in-store to be an owned and operated channel. We believe that's the rising tide raises all ships mentality. So we're a SaaS business. It's a platform fee-based business. It's not a greedy business, right? It's priced in a way that puts skin in the game for both sides, right? Yeah, we operate as a platform. There has to be some level of fee that keeps our lights on, right? Because we have to buy data, we have to operate on a cloud service, and then a portion of rev share, but nothing in a way that, I think if people talk to us, they'd realize that we're really trying to be conscious of what their goals are as well. And I think legacy business, at least for what I've learned in the UK, correct me if I'm wrong, it's always been lopsided, where the service provider asks for a majority of that rev share, right? And maybe that's because they funded the hardware, or maybe that's because they are just saying, this is the way it's been, this is the way it will continue to be, right? Where the retail media network gets less than 50% of the revenue. We just take a different approach. We think of it as, just if you went on the internet and look for anything that's a platform fee, that it's very similar to the way that we price it.
No, very good, Paul. Thanks so much. And very, very interesting, very, very innovative. I'm sure going to be very well received, enabling media agencies to buy in-store retail media programmatically. It's a big idea. It doesn't exist, to my knowledge, in Europe. And, you're pioneering something that I think is going to be very, very good for the industry. So well done. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and good luck.
Yeah, a little teaser. If this show comes out later in the week here, you will have seen some pretty big news from us. So hopefully that comes true. And I appreciate Steve you taking the time and let me talk a little bit on your show.
Very good. You're very welcome. See you soon, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah, I like